Everything you learned in history class was a lie. Well, maybe not everything, but they skipped the best parts. Introducing Stupiracy, where stupidity meets conspiracy. Ever heard of the Olympic marathon that nearly killed its runners? Or the time a pope put another pope's corpse on trial? Join me, Scott Rizzuto, and Tim McKernan as we uncover the most outrageous historical moments and mind-blowing conspiracies you won't believe actually happened. Tune in to Stupiracy for your weekly dose of historical absurdity. Available wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, history is dumb, but laughing at it is smart.
Hi, everybody. This is Adriana Trajani. I'm the host of You Are What You Read. I have the privilege of interviewing luminaries of our times about the books that shaped them from childhood until now. We get everybody from Sarah Jessica Parker to Kristen Hanna, Mitch Albom, Susie Essman, Craig Ferguson, Rainn Wilson, Amor Tolls, you name it, they come, they share. New episodes of You Are What You Read drop every Tuesday on Apple, Spotify, or any major streaming platform wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome into this special edition of UAP. I am Stephen Diener, back with you again on UAP, the Unidentified Alien Podcast. And again, for a special reason, because normally I wouldn't drop back-to-back episodes, considering we just put out the episode yesterday with Nick Pope and a new discussion there on some world affairs and things that are happening currently in the news with UAP. But when it comes to an hour-and-a-half long conversation with Jason Sands that happened exclusively on Twitter last week, well, that's where I make the exception and say, I guess I can drop back-to-back episodes this time, because that's exactly what we're doing here on this special edition of UAP. I'm going to present to you the conversation that took place between myself, Jason Sands, and various other users on Twitter. This happened last Friday on June 14th. It was exclusively on X on Twitter, where it was a Twitter Spaces conversation. It's been viewed or visited at least a few thousand times on Twitter, but I know not everybody has access to that or has a Twitter or, goes on there a lot to do things or listen to shows. So I wanted to find a way to make that conversation more accessible to more of you. And I thought this was the best way to do it, just to put it on the podcast as an episode. So that way, if you hadn't heard it or if you were only able to attend for a little while, then you can hear the whole thing here. So for the most part, this is mostly unedited. So what I mean by that is the only editing I didn't censor anything out or, anything like that. The only editing I did was just some, bad internet connection, crackling, including myself. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that I was cutting in and out as much as I was during that Twitter Spaces until I listened back on the recording to produce this episode. So you're going to hear some cutting in and out on my end when I'm talking, which is super annoying. So I apologize for that. That said, this is the last time I'm going to do anything UAP related on my phone. So from now on, I'm going to do my best to not do anything UAP on my phone as far as interviews or things like that are concerned, because it just doesn't sound great on my end, and I really don't want that. I want it to sound as clean as possible. But unfortunately, on this case, there is some cutting in and out on my end, but most of it is okay. So I cut some of that out. Again, it's just some of the things when it came to time constraints and things like that, because it was pretty long, but it's still pretty long, but I didn't cut anything out that was going to ruin the integrity of the conversation or ruin the integrity of anybody's questions. So I just want to put that out there, that this is really, for the most part, the raw conversation that took place last Friday night during the Twitter Spaces between myself and Jason Sands and, again, some other Twitter users who were listening in and speaking that night. I think there were over, 700 people in there during the time I was talking to Jason. And then overall, a few thousand have partaken in it since the original recording. So that's why I wanted to get it out so more of you could hear it if you didn't get to. Because Jason isn't really doing any interviews at all on any shows until after the James Fox documentary comes out, which won't be for another couple of months. So this is the closest we're going to get to hearing directly from him with questions from me and people like you on a lot of things that, we wanted to hear him answer, since he came out talking about his face-to-face encounter with a tall white alien at the Nellis Range 30 years ago. And so much more information has come out since then about what he's found out in the program, and a lot of things maybe you've never heard you're going to hear right now during this conversation. We talk about, what type of aliens are amongst us, according to him, and telepathic connection that he has with that alien that he came face-to-face with. What happens? Why don't they want us using our nukes and atomic bombs? It's a really heavy conversation. There's a lot in here, even some religious aspect things, and even kind of touch on the timeline. You hear a lot about 2027. We get into that toward the end of the conversation. So, again, just a lot of things here that I hope you enjoy, that you find informative, that you're really not going to hear in any other podcast, I don't think, at least for now. So this is kind of an exclusive here that I wanted to bring to you. So without any further ado, I'm going to start it off now. You're going to hear as Jason comes in, because I spoke for about 25 minutes before Jason came in. I didn't really find that necessary to include here, because I want to highlight what Jason Sands had to say during this conversation. So I'm going to bring it in right there as Jason came in and I started asking the first question when he popped into the Twitter space. So here you go, UAP exclusive with firsthand witness in the program and otherwise right now with Jason Sands. Enjoy. Jason, I was just saying that I spoke to Paul Hynek a little while ago as a guest on UAP, and that episode's going to air on Monday when I put it out. And he mentioned something to me that you and I talked about that was really striking when I heard him say it. He's like, what if it isn't just government actors? What if it isn't just three-letter agencies and government contractors that are stopping disclosure? But what if it's the NHI themselves? What if it's these, certain NHI groups or power players in the NHI that are in cahoots with military or government contractors that, that we seems like to be true? Maybe it's up to them. Jason, thanks for coming in here tonight. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I honestly, and when we were talking about that, I honestly have thought that many times, that this may be the choice of the NHI, the way that even the program is run, that they want a degree of distance, from both our government and from us for their own reasons.
It's such a fascinating thought. I mean, it's really one that I never considered until you said it to me, and then Paul said it to me earlier today in our recorded interview, and I was like, "Holy cow! This is the second time I've heard this now." And so it really struck me to think that, are we out? I hate to say outnumbered, but are we even in control of the situation?
I would say, as much as maybe the program people think they're in control, or if any of them do, I would think that they would be mistaken. I mean, honestly, they're obviously out technology. They don't have the leading tech. They obviously haven't been around as long as the other NHI, if they're part of the program. And it's quite possible they're being played and or brushed off whenever they have a bad idea. And literally they're being left with table scraps. And that may be on purpose, because the NHI don't want them to be playing with pointy sticks and hurting themselves and hurting us. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, if I was an intelligent race and say we get to Mars and we find that, yeah, there is life there, but they're not very well advanced, and all they are cultivating land for themselves underneath the ground and trying to subsist, I wouldn't want to hand them a nuke. Why would I do that? Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, so I'll ask this question real quick, because I know a lot of you are waiting to ask questions, and I'm not ignoring you. I want to get everybody in here. But I'll ask this one first real quick. Is there an illusion of control, Jason? Are they, you know what I mean? With the cooperation that takes place, let's just say in some type of, subterranean base between NHI and humans, is there that illusion of control where they say, oh, cute humans, you can think you have it all figured out, but we're the ones that are actually, controlling this whole thing? Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, if you had a computer and they had a supercomputer and could delete whatever patents they wished, whatever social media they wish, yeah, they could literally control the way we talk, the way we walk, what we produce, the way we feed our babies. They could do a lot of things, but obviously they haven't done us a dirty deed in all these years. I mean,
Yeah,
we've kind of done ourselves dirty deeds, but not them.
true enough.
So I would say that we're okay, but there may be a level of control, just like a parent would not let a child near a hot stove. Maybe that's the kind of control you're describing, but not a total control to the point where we're being oppressed.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a good perspective. Christian,
Today.
go ahead. I know you're waiting.
Hey, Jason, huge fan. I got a lot of respect for you. Um, okay, so what question to ask? Let's see. So, man, I'm getting nervous all of a sudden.
You got
Hold
one
on.
shot
So,
at it,
okay,
Christian. Let's go.
all right. So,
Kidding.
here's the thing about that. About what you were saying about the NHI. I think, some people think they're good. Some people think they're bad. Some people think they're in the middle. And I think that there's a lot of different things going on. I think there's multiple NHI. I posted on the comments below something from Carmel. It's a slide that he wrote, and in number 4 it says covert agreements. It says NHI quid pro quo, and then it says I don't know, something about negative repercussions of disclosure. I don't know, something along those lines. And then I put it in another screenshot I took from Christopher Mellon where he was criticizing Arrow, and he says there's 5 different frequencies. In other words, 5 UAP, like 5 main UAP with different radio frequencies, and I've heard that those are different, NHI with different agendas. I don't know how true that is, but my point to you is, from what we were talking about earlier, it's NHI on top of the secrecy, because that's something that I've been wondering about. And if we made a deal with NHI, I think we made it with the wrong kind. And is there another kind looking for revenge? Or what do you think about Dan? I did terrible with my question. I feel like I totally screwed it up, but I'm just gonna let it at that.
I think
And yeah,
no,
what
you're
about
right.
deal?
I think I need to bring in some context first, and some of this is what I was um, telling Steve about. Um, but you have to kind of go back a little bit into the history, like you were alluding to, where what happened after Roswell? Well, we took some equipment, we took some biologics, we didn't own the stuff, and instead of treating it like it was a downed craft, we treated it like what it was, and then inadvertently we go forward and chop up the dead bodies and try to figure out what made them work. And I think lo and behold, later on, they came back and said, hey, we had a down craft here. We know you're in possession of it. Can we please have it back? And our family members and friends remains, can you please hand that back too? And any survivors. And they literally were treated badly. So we got off to a very bad start with that, I think. That was our first big mistake, because saying that, well, you guys could be just mutant Russians for all we know is a very bad excuse when you're an NHI trying to get your own people back, and you're like, we're Russian, really? Yeah, I think it threw them for a loop, but it didn't make them come back and like start eating people's brains and stuff like that. Nothing like that happened. It seems like what happened was they probably went back and talked to their own forms of government and said, what can we do about this? These people are treating us like jerks. It's not the whole human race. It's this one group that, they started this thing, and they're part of the army right now. And they took off with our stuff. And what do we do, And I think it took them a while to come up with a response. And I think that's when the contact at Holloman took place in the 60s, as they came back and said, okay, well, we need to bring our emissaries in and start to talk to them about this and tell them this is how we need this to work out. And I think that's why we have this doomsday ticking away in about the 2020s or 2030s that they're coming back for their stuff. And if we don't give it back, or the people in the program don't give it back, they're going to start putting those people in the program that are responsible to death. And that's the result of this poor treatment that we've been giving them in the program. So I think the hostility part of it may be because we kind of pushed them into that box. And then other ones, though, I've heard like reptilians, they're in some people's firsthand accounts, they're absolutely horrible to deal with. Luckily, I've never had much of a dealing with them, except one evening when I was a small child. I thought it was a nightmare, but I prayed and they went away. But they looked reptilian. I thought I was having a bad dream. But in the program, the name was brought up reptilian, and it was not in a positive light, I can tell you that much. But that race definitely seems like they want to dominate our world. I think they look at us as, I don't know, a waste of time and effort on all the other races that are trying to make something out of us and make us better. Because
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how to put my hand up. Everyone's putting their hand up and they're amazing, and I don't know how to do it because that's the first time I've done this thing. Stephen, lovely to talk to you. Jason, you are incredible. The fact that you're doing this is just amazing, and my hat is off to you. I'm an Englishman, and to make the statement, my hat off to you is a really big statement to make.
I'll let you in on a secret. I'm an old Yorkie.
Well, there you go. I'm from Yorkshire myself.
There you go.
So my question, I've got a couple, but just to slightly backtrack, Stephen,
Yes.
I don't want to hear the same people speaking in front of Congress, because we're only going to go round and round in circles. We're not going to get any new information. So to answer that, we need to move forward. We don't need to move backwards. We don't need to be stale. Jason, appreciating the fact that you're doing this and appreciating that you're talking to a bloke in Halifax in Yorkshire. The question that is always going on in my mind is, you mentioned that you had an experience when you were a child, and these people that are in these SAP programs, is it something that's common with people that have had something within an earlier life to be put into this program or accepted into this program? Is it common for that?
I would say, yeah. The more I've been exposed to it and hearing other people's stories, that seems to be the case, both in abducted families and sometimes in the program, people that get chosen for it. I think, again, the NHI may have something to say about who gets picked.
So that's the question then, isn't it, really? That are they picking the people that are involved in this, not us?
Yeah, I think so.
And sorry, just one last one, and then I promise you I will leave you all alone and you can do whatever you want to do.
Go for it.
How many people do you think are involved in this? Just a complete ballpark figure, because every time I listen to a podcast, every time I listen to people's stories, the amount of people involved in anything to do with any sort of NHI at all just seems to be not in the tens, but in the thousands of people. And there's 40 coming forward, you're coming forward, Grush, etc. And you would think that more people would be able to talk and more people would come forward than actually that there is.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are more that are supposed to come forward, right, Jason? But they just haven't yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I know would just have been too scared.
And is that it? Is it the scaredness that's stopping them, and is it the scaredness of the government?
They're not like me and Grush. Grush was not part of the program. I was, but I got, I left it behind in the 90s. They're still stuck in it. So this is their livelihood. This is their career. This is their bread and butter. If they step out of line and get, lose everything, then yeah, they're in a bad place.
And are you afraid of retaliation from the beings? Or are you afraid from retaliation from the government?
The government.
Not the beings themselves?
No.
Right, okay. Right, guys, I'll turn my mic off. Thank you so much for letting me talk.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'll get to Denver, Mike. I know you've been waiting a while, and I do want to get to everybody. I'm not ignoring anybody. I just want to try to get all the answers and questions and all the good thoughts in here. So, Denver, Mike, go ahead.
If you could explain how to hold your hand up as well, then I won't interrupt you ever again.
Oh, no problem. I'll do that. Go ahead.
Hi there. Jason, thanks a ton. You're an American hero. Couple quick questions. I'd like to just go one at a time. I'm curious if you know about the Bob Lazar, a story about Bob Lazar that he doesn't talk about very much, where he said in an interview, an old interview that's hard to find online, that he read a classified document that was about religion, and he said in that interview, and again, it's really hard to find this online. However, he said that that Jesus Christ, two other
Denver.
Oh, sorry.
Still there, Denver?
Sorry, yeah, I'm there. Sorry about that. And that Jesus.
Oh, good.
I don't know where I got cut off. Jesus Christ and two other religious figures were somehow genetically altered, created by the NHI to protect, to put in place to create religion to protect the containers. And I was wondering if you knew anything about that, if you knew anything about the other two individuals that were referenced, or anything you could say on that.
Yeah, earlier today we had a really good discussion on that. The nearest I can tell you is I have read the Bible from front to back and understand the redemption story of Christ. I'm also familiar with what Lazar said about that being containers. This is what I think what he means by containers, at least, and it's mainly from my opinion and also my faith. Okay, so that's all I'm going off of with this container issue. I know in the Bible we're described as being like a shell, and this shell houses an eternal soul or life force, whatever you want to call that. So it is a container. Now, whether or not an NHI can also inhabit our container, maybe they also can utilize these bodies for their purpose. Now, I know in our case, if you take the Bible seriously and all that we're a fallen race. We weren't meant to have to suffer the way we do. We were meant to be caretakers of this earth, according to the Bible. And we lost that ability, and now we have to work all of our days. That was the curse.
Sorry.
Well, and then on top of that, because we were broken, we also were still loved, just like you would love your child, even though they might have done something that hurt you. So but the replacement for our wrongdoings was a sacrificial blood of some kind, and that's what Christ's life was to be a replacement for all the animals that, animals' blood that was given. And again, it's to reconcile our shell and our living soul that's in this shell, so that when we die, we can pass on and become what we're supposed to be.
I think a part of my question might have been cut off. He said in that interview with Knapp that he didn't necessarily believe it, but he said that that Jesus Christ and two other individuals may have been genetically altered humans created by NHI with the sole purpose of creating religion, which would actually lead credence to the Bible, I would believe, and potentially strengthen religious beliefs.
Well, honestly, yeah, that's what they say, is that, he only had his mother's DNA in him, and that his father's DNA was, God. Like it said, it was supposed to be an immaculate conception, right?
Yes.
That it wasn't normal. It was like artificial insemination kind of thing, or something like that. And that was kind of what happened. And then you hear about other things that, like John the Baptist, he also is described as having Ezekiel's or Elijah's spirit in him. Okay, so you have a different body, but the same spirit. So these are the things that are really confusing to both me and I think a lot of people and scholars. And I think Lazar touched on that. Now, exactly what that means, I don't know, but in both cases, our bodies are containers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with something like this, it really lends to, the deeper discussion. And Mello, you can go next, by the way. In UFO intros, you can go after Mello.
Could I ask my
But
second question?
oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt. I also wanted to just briefly ask, and I apologize if this has been asked before, the NHI's views of the nature of spirituality, the what happens after we die, for lack of a better term, religion of the NHI.
Oh, I've heard and read that they fully know exactly who Jesus Christ is and what he did for us. They also, in many cases, have relayed to their abductees that there is a supreme being or God or supreme intelligence that they believe in also, and that personage is something that they are in contact with fully, whereas we are not. We kind of are separated a little bit, unless we choose to, synchronize with that belief or whatever. So again, they fully seem to know about religion and that maybe they don't call it the same thing as we do, just like we call it different things in different cultures, but it usually ends up being, there's a figurehead of God, a God of some kind that is supreme, and that at some point there's either a savior or a major prophet that helps people to find their path.
Yep, thank you, Denver Mike. And it's really interesting discussion. It's actually a topic I'm writing about right now. And Jason and I have spoken about this actually last week. We kind of had in our conversation we had that topic came up, and it was really insightful. And while we were talking, Jason, so thanks again for spending all that time with me last week and for coming in here tonight.
Yeah.
And I think it really is kind of the ultimate question when it comes to this: is how do you align religious beliefs and divinity with some of these questions, right? And what I find interesting, if you can just speak to this real quick, Jason, and then Mello, you can go up next. But could you speak to the story of, and if you're not familiar with it, I apologize, then we can move on. But the story of Valiant Thor, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am.
So it's said that this Venusian, a being from Venus, came to Earth as part of a mission to help people become closer to God and live a better life here on Earth, to have peace and harmony, to have technology that would end hunger and disease and all those different things that plague us. And basically, he was told to kick rocks after being down here for a few years and working in the Pentagon. So if that's the case, if this story of this person who looked like just a regular guy like you and I, and he was described as like a handsome man, is how the people described him back in the 60s who tell the story. If that's true, then does that kind of points to this knowledge of an all-powerful being in God being accepted by other races, right?
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, that particular story, if it's true, yeah, he's describing that supreme being and his relationship to us as well as others. So, and it's a theme that you hear out of other firsthand people that have been abducted or talked to by NHI, and they tell the same exact story, that these other races are fully aware of that status, of the fact that there is a supreme being, and that that we're all part of this family of life, and that some of us have fallen like we did and others have not. So some of them required a Christ in their life, others only required a prophet that didn't have to sacrifice his life because they weren't a broken race like us. And that seems to be something that you can discern from our own text and what these abductees are saying. So, like I said, there's always been a very strong relationship between the spiritual side and the biblical side. It's just that the biblical side, we've been in such a lull for so long that we've forgotten the reality of what the stories of the ancient peoples have said about when God actually walked the earth with us. That was a reality at one point for us.
Yeah, Book of Genesis.
Yeah. And so to ignore that as a believer is to really ignore your own Bible, because you hear the stories about God walking with them. You hear the stories about the angels appearing to them. You hear about Abram being visited by sons of God and having lunch with him and being blessed by them with children. You see all of these kinds of stories, and yet, pulpits today will never tell you that was real. Oh, yeah. No, you're talking about fluffy clouds and angel wings, and, just shut up. I don't want to hear about this. I think it's kind of silly. If you've read your Bible from front to back for yourself, you don't get that impression. Especially if you're reading it to believe each of the words as if this was really spoken word of God through the mouths of many prophets over the years. Then you can't just ignore parts that you don't like.
Yeah, it's true. Mello, go ahead. I know you've been waiting a while too. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Sands. It's been a long time. It's good to see you again. Right. So you were discussing your firsthand experience seeing some sort of internal government-oriented data elements suggesting the actuality of reptilians. And then also, I think you said that sometimes they eat us. So I was hoping to get a bigger picture on that. For example, how often do they eat us? How many of them eat us, and how many have been eaten of our species, and what has the government and/or the reptilians done to keep it a secret?
Purely conjecture on my part, but the eating part of it is something that I've read about, not that I've seen it for myself. Now, what I've read up on and what other people that do have hand witness of reptilians is that they do have a bloodlust. That it's almost on par with what a shark feels in the frenzy, and that's something that apparently is part of their race for some reason. And the other thing is that how many of us are eaten? That I have no clue. I know we have a huge amount of missing people every year, especially children. Some of it to trafficking, which is awful to begin with, but if there's a cadre of them that are also likewise being abducted by these NHI that have similar lusts, it's a place my mind just truly hates to go. But I have no idea how many I'd have no clue how to even ascertain how that I could even come up with a number.
Do you have any more specifics you're allowed to share in terms of where you read about this?
It's just been online sources, really, things that people have thrown at me over the years. And I'm only talking like past 5 years, because I really don't read a lot on this stuff. I think I read Eric von Daniken's books when I was 10 or 11 years old, and never read another book for many, many years on UAP. And then after I started being part of the UAP Task Force Forum, I didn't work for them, but I was on the forum, and then that's when people started throwing me links. Hey, read this. What do you think? And that's when I started getting read up on stuff. And I think it was over 3 years ago. Somebody threw me some stuff on reptilians, and that's where I read it. So I probably lost that link since, but it was out online. It was just something you could do from home, and it just popped up as part of it. There was also an interview that I thought was interesting that was supposed to be from a female reptilian and some human that she happened to be speaking to, but she could appear as a very beautiful brown-haired lady, and she was very polite, but she did describe that her kind does have a bloodlust, and did confirm that, and that some of the people in her race did give in to that lust and did kill people, but it wasn't a lot. But they were. But she did describe her own people as having a problem with doing bad things to humans.
Jason, what stops? And by the way, UFO intros, you'll be up next. What stops the NHI and whatever race it might be from saying, "Screw you guys, we're taking over"? I mean, as from what you've heard, from what you know, from what you saw in the program, and the conversations that you were privy to. I mean, why don't they just say,
They're not the boss.
we're done?
They're not the supreme being. I think the supreme being and all of his armies, or whatever you want to call them, whether they're angels, whatever you want to call them, NHIs, other people that are on his side, they're not letting that happen. And I think that's the greatest fear of the races that do want to just do away with us, and that wishes God would just dump us to the wayside so that they could, take everything they wanted. And I think that's what's stopping them, is that there is a force for good. There are people that are on our side and want to wish us well, and that's what's keeping the balance. And I think that's been the ongoing war and unseen war since the very beginning. There's been that push and pull all the way through.
So there might be like a supernatural aspect to this.
Yeah, there's something more than what we give credence to. That's the real hidden war for this.
UFO intros, go ahead. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. I just have a couple questions. And honestly, Jason, what you just said in the past, like a couple minutes, is really enlightening to me and maybe caused me to reframe some of my questions. So the first question is, so when I talk to experiencers in my spaces, often their story, their narrative is comprised of, there's two different components. There's like the qualitative and the quantitative data, right? So the quantitative would be like the logistical stuff, like did it make a sound? What did it look like? If you were to hold an object at arm's length in front of your head, how big was it in the sky? Was it a golf ball? Was it a quarter, a dime, a football? And then the quantitative data, the qualitative data, the qualia, is like what ideas or thoughts came to you? Like, how did it make you feel? How did it impact you? Right? That kind of stuff.
Right.
And often when I'm talking about the qualitative stuff, I'll get into like, did you have a hunch either way? Like, did this feel alien, extraterrestrial? Did it feel spiritual? Did it feel like, something like technological? And so based on your story and your experience, do you have a hunch either way? Like, do you think that what's going on primarily is extraterrestrial, or is it something that's been here on Earth for a while and it's an ancient to the world?
My opinion falls back onto the time when I was in the desert and I had the telepathic communication. The feeling I had sharing that telepathic communication, because that's where I could feel this entity and who he was and his personality, his character, everything about him, and I was sharing the same with myself, or he was feeling the same about me. I had the impression that I was talking to somebody who was like part of my family, but just not from around here. In other words, it's like, knowing somebody from Germany, and we were just, talking to each other on the street, and I'm like, hey, I'm really getting along great with you, that kind of a feeling. And that was only after my initial shock was overcome by his talking to me, kind of gently and civilly to me, that I was able to calm myself down enough to even feel that way. But when I had calmed down sufficiently, that's what it felt like, was that I was talking to just like another person, just as myself, and that we shared some very common ideals that, being a good person is a good thing, being civil is a good thing, being respectful, and all these other things that we had that were part of the conversation were very mutual between the two of us. It's really, that's what I felt like.
Yeah. So just a little side note to that question, and then if I'm allowed one more, I would appreciate it. But
Sure.
so did when you interacted with this being in the desert there in Nevada, did you feel like it was like above you, like in intelligence or anything? Like as you look at your dog, Terry Lovelace talks
No,
about it. Okay,
no.
it was your equal.
Yeah, he did not come off like I'm more intelligent than you. I felt him, and it was nothing but respect for each other. It was like peers, just two people meeting in the desert is all it felt like.
But so was the fact that he was this, or the fact that it was communicating with you telepathically, that could provoke some feelings of awe or adoration or respect, or maybe even what's the word, basically, did you feel compelled to feel a camaraderie to it? Does that make sense?
Oh, no,
Because you've never communicated with a human telepathically like that. So did you
no,
feel submissive to it at all?
no, I didn't. I felt like I was invited to speak to him, just as you were allowed. Just like you and I, when we agreed to speak about this subject, you and I are mutually being respectful. I wait for you to speak, and then I speak my response, and you wait for me, and then you respond back. It was very much the same thing. It was an invitation to speak. I could have chosen to get back in the car, I'm pretty sure, if I wanted to. But I didn't do that. I still wanted to help him because I was trying to figure out, well, what can I do to help you get your craft running better, or fixing it. And I was really concerned about him at first. I thought he really was a human suffering from hypothermia, and I really thought he was dying. So that concern was still part of my talking to him initially. But then as we talked, again, we both calmed down. We both got to know each other better, kind of thing. And we got on to an even conversation after that, just like everybody else.
My last question, real quick, for you, and thank you again, Stephen.
Let me say something before you go, because there's something important I think you need to take down as a point. The emotional level of our conversation was also there. That was more basic than the speech and telepathy part of it. The emotion that I felt from him, those were easier to tell that they were coming from him and not me, because his wellspring of emotion was not the same. Those were not synchronized like the speech was and the telepathy was. And everything about his emotional state was caring. He had concern for me as well as himself, because it was cold that morning, and I offered him my jacket. He refused. And I refused to refuse his refusal, and eventually handed him the liner of my jacket, and he graciously responded and took it. But yeah, there was real concern for me as well, standing out there in the cold desert, and that was on an emotional level, and I could receive that part of the communication as well. So there's a part of that you can't just take in as a a word that he spoke to me. It was more than that. You're talking complete. You're talking about a complete. I don't know how to even describe it to you guys. If you can imagine that while I'm talking to you, you can feel my frustration right now in trying to describe how this communication actually goes. You would feel my frustration right now at the same time I'm speaking words to you. That's what it's like. Because he was speaking verbally, but it was a totally foreign language to me, but I understood, because the meaning of the word that I'm speaking to you even now, I'm attaching very quickly with my own mind before it comes out of my mouth. And again, when you receive it so quickly and understand it so quickly, you don't even notice it.
Well, and I receive it through my own bias, right? My own perspective. So it's all just symbol. We're speaking through symbols right now in a crude way.
Exactly. But you understand that there's a meaning that you're attaching to each word. So if you don't understand my language, but I can understand your words, therefore the meaning is somehow reaching you.
Right. But when something's communicating with you empathically, that's like you feel what they mean. It's not just like.
Exactly.
It's almost like there's no even opportunity for manipulation. It's fascinating. Again, I could speak with you for an hour or two just on that. But okay, so my last question, Jason, and I'll wrap it up here. Who are your like top researchers, or once you were on this forum, right? You weren't read into certain programs, or you're part of this forum. Who would you put at the top of the list as far as like researchers on the phenomena that you feel like you've been influenced by?
Oh, well, ancient history would be Dolan and von Daniken, and several others that I can't remember all their names right now.
That's interesting, specifically because Dolan kind of downplays the ancient alien hypothesis stuff.
But he's looked into it, and he did have some very good conclusions.
It's interesting. Pavel, you'll be able to go next. I just want to ask real quick, Jason, since we're on the topic here, the subject of, of course, your meeting in the desert in 1994. Did you ever hear what happened to this being? Were you curious? Did you seek him out after this meeting in the desert? And I'm sure you've spoken on this before, but I just wanted to try to get it out there again.
Yeah, I've tried to reach out mentally to him, and I think I've gotten a response that he's like, yeah, I'm here, and you're doing fine. Everything's going as planned is kind of what his response is, and pleased to have met you, kind of a response back is what I've gotten back.
That's pretty wild. So you still have that type of like connection with him after all these years?
Yeah, honestly, I don't feel it was kind of weird. His feelings felt just like mine would. However, the timing was not my timing. Like when he asked me for the technology or for some metal, and I said, well, maybe Area 51 can help you out. And he was like, I'm not asking those people for anything, they're barbarians.
Crazy.
So anyway, that's when I realized that, he was speaking to me, and it felt like disgust. But I had enough self-awareness to think, wow, where did that feeling of disgust come welling up inside of me? And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not disgusted, he is. And and that's kind of a part of the telepathy that we're not used to. And I realized at that point, this is just part of the telepathy thing, and I'm just not used to this. That it feels just like that, where his thoughts felt just like the same way that you are quietly thinking on the couch to yourself whenever you're pondering something. And it felt the same exact way. Like I said, he felt just like me, but just everything was coming from different experiences and memories.
Right.
And I had to realize the parts of that were not my own.
So do you know if he's still on Earth from that connection? Do you know if he was ever able to leave Earth?
No, he's gone. I know he's back home or somewhere else.
Okay. UFO intros, thanks for all the questions. It was good stuff. And Pavel, you can go up next, and then Parsi after Pavel. I know Parsi's been waiting a while too, and then John after that.
I'll drop down so you can bring up more speakers. Thanks, Steven.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
All good.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Hello, Mr. Sands. How are you?
I'm doing good.
First of all, I want to thank you for you've been there on Spaces all day. So thank you for that. I had two questions, very specific, because I've heard Steve talking about his experience, and I've seen Tom DeLonge mention some of the Greek mythology and secret machines, and I've seen Dr. Diana Pasolka also talk about the Greek symbols that these rockets have when they send them to space. Do you have any knowledge on what that connection may be, or why that connection exists to Greek mythology? That's one question, and the other one after.
There seems to be a propensity inside the program to make those connections, as well as to solar systems and star systems. And because there is a commonality, I think, in Roman and Greek history, and they had studied these as well, that they just happen to have a common bond there. And besides, our language, the English language, does have a lot of that sort of symbology in there, the way that we evolved our alphabet and also Latino or Latin languages are built upon the same thing. So there's a lot of commonality there with the Roman Greco history and evolution. And I think that's just the commonality there. It just happens to be something they do. It's not like they're doing something cryptic with it. I mean, sometimes there's art, there's people that put numbers together and go, ooh, look at that coincidence. I can draw a circle and it's exactly pi r squared, therefore it's mystical. It's like, well, no, maybe not. It's probably just, you can probably mix the numbers a lot of different ways and come up with something different, but you just happen to think it has this only one connotation. I think that's kind of a misnomer, because I think Roman numerals in our language, or at least in the English language, is very common. And I think that was just the way it went with all the Apollos and space program stuff. And that's just my take, though. There may be some secret reason for doing that, but most of the time, okay. I do know some SpaceX mission folks, and they say that no, it's just mainly tradition. There's nothing mystical about it.
Okay. Thank you. And the last question is, and I'll drop down after, in the investigations that I'm doing about consciousness studies, I've noticed that there's this like secretive, there's a lot of secrecy when it comes to human potential in terms of, the remote viewing program and all that stuff. I was wondering if you have an idea of how powerful, or if we as humans, as a human species, have any groundbreaking skills or something like that, because I know you've experienced telepathy. I happen to be someone that has experienced it too, but I'm wondering how much knowledge you have about the potential we actually have. Thank you.
I think as a result of my experience with telepathy, that if I can do it, anybody could do it. Honestly, it felt so natural that I just stepped right into it. There was no headache, there was no dizziness or anything involved. It just happened. It was like I knew how to do it. I just needed to turn the switch on. So I think it's just a missing part of our species where we don't acknowledge it, therefore we don't teach it early enough, or even try to teach it to ourselves a lot of times. So I think it's just something everybody can do. And there's probably some pretty cool sides to that.
Yeah, I know Edgar Casey has spoken about that. He famously said that everybody has the ability. It's just matter of whether or not you're able to practice it and do it. It's really intriguing. I know Parsi, I called on you next, so go ahead. I know Parsi has a really interesting story he wants to relate to you, Jason. So Parsi, you're up.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Jason, my heart's pounding in my chest. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your bravery. I'm going to try and keep it short, but I'm a lifelong experiencer. Me and my twin experienced a craft up close, 20 feet away from us. We interacted with the NHI and the craft. And ever since then, the phenomenon's been in my life by orbs and crafts. So just recently, in the last year or so, the phenomenon's exploded in my life. I did 2 regressions. I learned about a past life as an alpha draconian reptilian. And to answer Melodemon's question, I saw exactly what they do to the humans. It was like having a literal past life memory, and it was very, very traumatic. I started doing these self-healing meditations of Joe Dispenza to get rid of this reptilian attachment. And then these orbs started showing up around my house, around my apartment. And I asked these orbs who they are. So in a second regression, they presented themselves as these owl-headed NHI that took me to God, to God consciousness. And told me that they're in a battle with the reptilian and the gray hybridization agenda. So they come to me as these orbs, and I capture them as orbs, as donut-shaped craft, black triangle crafts. I have helicopter surveillance over my house. So my question to you, Jason, is: do you know what these orbs are and why so many people are seeing them all over the planet? Like, it's just not me. It's like, Bledsoe has been put up on a pedestal, but he's not the only one. I mean, there's so many of us, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. This has followed me all the way from where I was born in India. I belong to a minority of Persians called Parsis, Zoroastrians. There's only 100,000 of us in the world. So I've had this follow me all the way from India to New Zealand to Canada to Australia, where I am now. So I'll leave it at that and stop hogging the space. Thank you, Jason. Just your opinion on what these orbs could be.
Yes.
Thanks, Parsi.
Well, in all my experiences and all my reading, when it comes to orbs, they are life of some kind. I've heard at times they can be human. Other times they can be like you're talking about, these sort of owl-like beings. They can be other beings from other reaches of our reality. That seems to be a commonality when it comes to the orbs. Their meaning has been mainly that it's been a caring relationship. Whenever the orbs appear, there seems to be some sort of helpfulness to it. Even in Rendlesham Forest, I think that's something that one of the witnesses mentioned, was that the orbs that he saw, they all said that they were human, but that they had, no ill intent, and that they really were just saying, hi, it's us, kind of a thing. And that seems to be what it is. And perhaps what it is now that you're trying to give up that reptilian life and memory of it, maybe there's a residue there that maybe these other beings that appear as orbs are helping you to overcome. That would be my take on it, if everything I've read up on is true. But I don't have that personal experience with orbs, but I have heard it from other witnesses. And if I'm to take them at word, just as I take you, I'll trust that you're dealing with things just like they have been. That's what they seem to get out of it, is that there's something helpful about the showing up of the orbs, the smaller orbs, not the ones that leave burn marks and crap like that.
So Jason and John, you'll be up next here. When it comes to your knowledge from being in the program and everything, who were they most worried about? Like, who was on the most as NHL? What was it? The reptilians? Were they concerned about a hybridization agenda? I mean, what did you come across there?
Most of the stuff I could say was more predominantly tall whites.
Okay.
And they didn't have any agenda other than they wanted a spaceport, or they wanted resources or something like that. And they wanted very little to do with any kind of technology exchange.
I meant to ask you, too, when you were talking about presumably the tall white that you saw in the desert, and you said that you feel that, he's not on Earth anymore. Do you know where he went? Just to kind of jump back to that for a second.
I have to think about it, just like I did when they interviewed me. I feel like there's more information there. And my initial feeling is that, yeah, he's somewhere near that red star in the Leo galaxy. There's another habitable planet somewhere near there that I feel like that's where his home is.
And just for anybody who hasn't heard that, and I think I can mention this, Jason, since you just said it, but you drew that star map for Grush, correct? Where you drew the map and he recognized it as Leo.
Yeah, there was Grush that recognized it. You're right.
Okay. It's fascinating, to say the least. John, go ahead. You're up. And then I know you've been waiting as well, and we'll try to get to everybody. I know some of you have more questions as well, so we'll try to get to everybody. Go ahead, John.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate the space. And of course, Jason, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. So I have two questions. One about, your experience with the alien, and one about something you said earlier in Logan's space. So first question up. You touched on this a little bit just a while ago, but Stephen got you talking about it. But when you were in contact with this entity and you were asking it, why didn't it go over to Area 51 or whatever? And then previously you had said something along the lines of, well, that's where they kill us or whatever. I just wanted you to draw down on that a little deeper about exactly what you heard from him, felt from him, and what you think that was all about.
I felt a wave of disgust emotionally, and he said to me telepathically, I will not ask barbarians and murderers for any help. And it was like a matter of fact, that is that kind of statement. Just like me telling you, I will never talk to another gas station attendant or something, for as long as I live. It felt just like that to me. It was just like, and that's when he was like, is there anybody else that you could point me to? And that's when I mentioned my college professor that was a geologist. I was like, maybe he knows a metallurgist. And he was like, well, where's your college? And I was like, it's college in North Las Vegas, the community college in North Las Vegas. It's south and east from here. And he was like, okay, thank you. Got in his vehicle and poof.
But didn't you say he was wearing a U.S. military outfit?
Uniform.
So it seemed like he was working with somebody, right? Why wouldn't he have reached if the Area 51 people were the bad people, then who were the people he was working with?
Well, that's just it. I think perhaps that the uniform was either number one to make people feel better about his presence, and he didn't look so strange, or be number two, the one I think it was, is he was actually escaping with that craft from Area 51 after some kind of altercation, and the uniform was given him while he was working there, and that was
an alien prison break. I love that story the most. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, as fantastic as it sounds, that makes more sense to me, and it would also make more sense because this is why his craft was broken, is maybe they took a couple of pot shots and hit it with something, and yeah, it did damage his craft.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so now something you said earlier in today in Logan's Space was you had mentioned seeing up close a TR3B and a TR3A, and you didn't clarify that experience and whether that was on a military base, was that some other time? Can you go into those experiences for us?
Saw it at least 3 or 4 times while I've been living in Panhandle of Florida, Gulf Breeze area. I've seen the 3-story house looking one. That's a triangular craft, about probably the most. I've only seen and that would be the TR3. B. The TR3A, I think, is the smaller version, which is also a delta-shaped craft or a triangular-shaped craft, but it's smaller. And I think the two of them probably share some sort of a mission set that they both can utilize together. I think the smaller one may have onboard sensors that help them locate things, and maybe the larger craft is a cargo craft for retrievals, and maybe they're used in that sort of a role. I would think that would be the most likely in my mind, because that would be only one of the few common mission types that both the NHI and the program people would like, is to be there on scene first at a retrieval site.
Are you saying you think these are used to retrieve NHI downed craft?
Yeah, I would say that would be a viable mission set for those types of craft, and that would be one of the few mission types that maybe the NHI would approve of if they were to help design the craft and get it functional. Because if they could have a level of or degree of control that they're comfortable with, the NHIs that is, to go and recover any retrieved UAPs quicker than anyone else on Earth could do, that would be preferable to them. But there would have to be certain sanctions by the program people that, yes, anything that was recovered would be turned over to them, and that would probably be the other half of that agreement if my logic is serving me correctly.
Does your knowledge of these particular craft come from your time as an insider or stuff in the literature?
Kind of some of the literature and some of the actual people that have also claimed to have seen the two craft in action and what they were doing. And when I looked at the types of things like UAP being recovered about the same time, or there being other activity or talks of a crash, or there's some kind of an exchange coming and going from the craft of cargo, it just made sense to me that, it probably a large airframe like that would be a great cargo bay sized craft that you could use, and it could get there before anybody else. It just seemed to make sense to me logically as an analyst.
Thank you, John. That was great. And I know just you're up next, but I just want to. You mentioned the Panhandle, Jason, and I can't help but to think of Eglin Air Force Base when I think of the Panhandle. And for anybody who knows, I'm in Florida myself. I'm in South Florida, so not exactly near the Panhandle. That's quite a drive from where I am.
Yep.
But thinking about Eglin, what's happening there? Because I just, Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida, from that area in the Panhandle, he talks about seeing, and even within the past couple of weeks, more sightings of big and small craft around Eglin.
Yep.
In your experience, is like what's happening there? Do you have any inside information on that area?
Yeah, I used to, when I was in the program, we would go there for missions, and they do testing just like they do any place else. If you're looking for very large airspace that's controlled by the military, it's got a lot of that too. It's probably comparable to like the Nellis test range, not as big, but still a good chunk of that airspace there in the Panhandle. There's a lot of places to hide stuff.
So what are they working on there? Do you know, like, what are they hiding there? Are we talking to the level of alien to human cooperation happening at Eglin, or is it not at quite at that level?
That I don't know. I never had a mission where, like on other times where I was hearing tall whites, grays mentioned. I never heard that when I was at Eglin. It was mainly human interaction at Eglin.
Just go ahead. You're up next.
Okay. Jason, I want to know which race is living amongst us, because they always talk about that there are races living amongst us, NHI living. Do you know, like, if there are?
Yeah, I would say that it's quite possible. I know the tall whites and the grays are here. The Reptilians, certainly. I know the Nords have been a part of my family's experiences for many, many decades. And maybe even the Pleiadians. They seem to be more our-sized, and I've had a couple of encounters with both my mother and myself. And most of those are very benevolent and kind experiences, more concern.
What do they look like, the Palladians?
They look like us, a whole lot like us, like blonde, blue-eyed us. Very Nordic looking as well. And
So do you think our species was altered by them?
yeah, I've always felt like these are parts of people that know a history or have a history with us, and we're connected already. We just don't know it right now. It's not revealed to us yet. Or that we were connected at some point, but that connection's broken while we are becoming what we're supposed to be, I think, is more correct. When I was a kid and growing up in life, that's when I had, several incidents with what I call either Palladians or Nordics, maybe both. So like I said, this has been something that, like other people have said, that it's surrounded my family for years. Because honestly, I can't explain why anybody would pick me for anything special. But apparently, they've been watching my family for a while, or watching over my family.
Can I ask another question? Do you think time, do you think because you had the experience that they've watched over your family, because time isn't like what it is to us? Or do you think the opposite, you were picked because of, you were just picked and then your path led you to that incident?
I would never venture that I'm anything special. So picked is not in my vocabulary. But maybe that is exactly the way that they did it. Maybe they picked because of my DNA makeup and my family's DNA. Or there's something about me that they see in my future rather than somebody else's. Same with my mother. Why did they contact her? I know she's a very compassionate person too. Yeah, I'm at a quandary to know exactly why they pick people or choose people. It seems to be random, but after my experiences, I don't consider them random. It's almost like I was meeting them at a point of destiny that was pre-chosen at some other time that was outside of, the bounds of time. It was like they knew when to be there.
How should we look at different abduction cases, Jason? I mean, just in your experience with all that, are there different circumstances surrounding different abductions from various NHI, or is it all done for the same reason?
No, I think it's done for different reasons. I think, like the Greys, most of those stories seem to revolve around what we were talking about before with, this container type thing where they're trying to work some kind of a way to get a soul into our body kind of thing or take it out. They seem to be very hell-bent on trying to figure that out. Whereas other races, they could care less. They're more into, oh, let's just check out this species kind of thing, like a zoo animal. And then there's the other ones that seem to be putting implants in to monitor the way we even live societally.
Right.
Why would they need to have an implant that follows us everywhere we go and monitor us? I would think is the only reason why is because they're looking to see how we interact with others and all this other stuff, and maybe even gives them some chemical markers that they can keep track of.
Yeah, the implant thing is so interesting. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember the name before I do, but I think it was Dr. Lear. But there was a doctor who he was a podiatrist, and he became kind of very fascinated with the abduction experience and people saying that they had these implants inside of them, and he did a bunch of surgeries taking out these little pieces of metal that they couldn't explain in people's bodies. And it was in the palm of the hand or in the neck or in the back or in the foot.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it could be. Yeah, I've got places that look like scoop marks of myself. When I went to go talk to one of the logistics people out of Skunk Works, he had a little scanner that looks for those little under the skin monitoring devices or
really
these things. And there's something in my left arm that it detected. I haven't had it.
Is that right?
Yeah, I had an X-ray when I got back home from that. It didn't show anything, but then I talked to somebody like you were talking about, that a guy who does this for the UAP community, and I've yet to go in for an MRI to figure out what this thing is.
Wow. Mello, you had another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few, but I'll just do one to start and then be patient. Let's start with this one. Okay. Do you have any evidence that there are, in fact, beings that have, from the traditional sci-fi movie sense, come from other worlds that are part of our physical reality?
Yeah, there definitely are others that are part of our physical reality. I mean, I wouldn't have had my encounter if they weren't. When it comes to your data synchronicity, and I would say that's inevitable. Data wants to, or a pattern wants to complete itself. And as long as the vibration and waveform that wishes to create that piece of information, whether it's our DNA, which is information, or otherwise, even in a computer, it wants to complete its cycle. And sometimes, that takes a while, but when it happens, it's synchronicity. And if there's another piece of information nearby, it synchronizes again with itself, and it forms even other shapes and waveforms. So eventually, there'll be a time when here in this time space that we are in, it seems to me that scientifically, if everything is interconnected at an atomic and a quantum level, synchronicity will happen scientifically and mathematically, because everything seems to be information, and they're finding more and more scientific proof for the fact that our universe looks more like it's got error code correcting code inside of it, and that this is all some sort of a matrix of information. Not that that does away with reality, but that reality is a byproduct of information patterning itself into what it is meant to do. Just like, that first moment of conception, for a baby, that just those two simple cells coming together create an entire human out of all the information just by extrapolating those strands of DNA, and it creates all the different body parts and everything else. It's still a mystery how something so small could have that much information in it. And yet here it is again, information. It's an information that's contained in those two cells. You see, everything seems to point to information, and that it wants to make itself into what it's meant to be. And that's why we are we are. I mean, how I don't know how else to put it other than the fact that science is finally starting to catch up in that regard.
I guess so. Shout out just real quick, everybody. Thanks for joining here tonight. It's great that we all get to talk together and talk with Jason. Some people, Nicole, Maniacal Mary, Ben, some of you I've seen here. Appreciate everybody stopping by, Mrs. SpaceX. So it's Christian. Cool to get everybody in here and, get to say our piece. It's really a good time. And thank you, Jason, for doing this. I know this isn't the first space you've done today.
No,
so the amount of time that you spent on these is just amazing. If it's going too long, by the way, please let us know. I mean, how much time are you willing to spend on here tonight?
I've probably got another 15 minutes, and then I'm going to start, wrapping it up.
Okay, very good. So we'll try to hold to that then. In that case, I know, Pavel, you have a question, but it looks like Christian Carroll, I don't think he got to ask a question yet, so go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much, Stephen, for the space. And thank you, Jason, so much from the Experiencer community for being willing to be here and share your experiences with all of us. I run a support group for experiencers here on X, and I have a question. And my question is what can the Experiencer community do better to help forward disclosure more for everyone? Thank you so much.
I think what's really missing is a complete picture of what everybody currently has looked at and researched. There's all these really great journalists that have really extensive libraries that even they probably are struggling to organize in a meaningful way, just like we saw with Dr. Greer saying that, he has all this really good information, but it still needs to be labeled and earmarked. So it's more searchable and useful to people. And I would say that, Molten Howe also probably has a trove. There's a lot of different things. MUFON, now MUFON lost a lot as well, but they have a lot of data. There's all this stuff laying around that just needs to be mulled through by people that are willing and good at that kind of research of experiencers. And I think that it's twofold. We need to record what people are seeing and do it more meaningfully. And as we go through that process, we need to get better at what we record and try to hone that information so that we're asking the right questions. People with telepathy, do they all feel like I do? Like that there was some kind of residue of consciousness from the person that was talking to them telepathically? Or is that just something that's an aberration only for few of us? These are serious questions. I mean, honestly, that, in all these other cases, the shapes, the colors that are displayed on the plasmas of these craft, they have in the scientific communities, because as you know, spectrum analysis, a certain color means a certain kind of plasma sometimes, or a chemical is present, or a condition within the environment is could be evidenced. All of these things have slipped through the cracks, and we need to learn from our past, get better at it, and therefore the future can now benefit from that by having better data. And the other thing is from the experiencers and the people that want to help out to capture more of the data. What can we do as a community? Because I'm sure there's software people that can come up with some really great just downloadable iPhone apps and stuff that can help capture some of the IR data at the same time as it captures visual data. And if you have like that, the ability to triangulate on a given incident of a UAP flying by, you get so much more information about the height, the speed, the distance, the shape, the size, all that stuff. You can extrapolate so much easier. And those are pieces of data that's missing on a lot of different things. And that was a problem just for me hearing from other analysts on that UAP task force forum, is that, yeah, a lot of times the pilot barely had time to press the button to go from video mode to infrared before the craft disappeared, you know? So even multi-moding has to be automated, but I'm sure we have people that can help with that in the community, and that'll boost the amount of usable data. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, I could go on and on about it, but those are just some of the very basic things we could do as a community of, you know, experiencers and believers to help get some more scientific data so that people like Gary Nolan can grab a hold of that and start using some of it and extrapolating some, you know, hypotheses from it.
Gosh, that would be great. That's a really good point, and that would really help a lot. What do you think needs to happen, Jason, before I get to some of these other questions and we wrap up? Are you? I'll ask it two ways here. Number one, are you talking with other potential whistleblowers that you know and insiders? And if so, what's it going to take for them to do what you're doing?
Yes, I am, but at the same time, they're scared. Like I said before, I'm out of the program. They're not.
Right.
They don't know what it's like to find a job on the outside. Some of them have suffered more greatly than I have. I mean, I got PTSD for, you know, both having a crappy childhood and some of the stuff I experienced in the Air Force. Some of them have seen even more horrible things than I have. They need help with that, as well as, you know, a home and a way to feed their families. So those are the kinds of things that are foremost in their mind. And that's what's stopping them. They don't know what's going to happen to them.
Is there any type of legislation? I know we talked about, you know, the Whistleblower Protection Act and things like that we hear about in the news, but is there any real type of legislation that can be passed for guys like that? I mean, what can be done?
I've tried to work it out with Congress, and I'm sure there's other people, but there are parts of the law now where if you under the NDAA protections, you can come forward, but you do have to kind of leave your life behind. If the people, if you're not discreet enough, in other words, if you don't do it in secret, and somebody in the program finds out you went and whistleblew, you're done. They literally could take retributive action against you. And it'll be very difficult for anybody to save you from that because of where these locations are. They're very clandestine, and it's very hard to track what's going on in those office spaces.
Scary. Pavel, you had another question?
I think he's away from his keyboard or what.
Yeah, it must be. That's
Okay.
right. Go ahead, Just.
Okay, so I have a question. It seems like we're heading towards a world war, or possibly. Do you think NHI will step in? And I have one more question as well.
Yeah, I do believe that they would. I don't think they want to see us end ourselves. And if there is some other like reptilian race that is pushing us towards war, and they see it, and they actually see that we do end up going to war, I think that they will step in and say, look, no. Especially if nuclear war is on the horizon. I think they've already, the NHI have numerous times shown us that they are unwilling to allow us to have a nuclear holocaust. That they have already stepped in back in the 60s when they switched on and off both the Russian and the American Minuteman missile type sites and things like this. That was a show of force of them saying to us, look, you want to end yourself and be nutso? Here, this is what we could do to you, but they stopped it at the very last second and showed everybody, look, this is how seriously we take this. We're not going to let you guys just, nonchalantly start popping nukes off all over the damn place. I
What
think that was one of their initial statements.
do you think that's because of us, or because they want this planet to stay unpolluted and pristine and not be destroyed by us?
I think they want, when you say that they want this planet to survive, I think that's true, but I don't think that they separate us from the planet. I think they look at
Right.
us part of the planet as well, so they don't want us to be gone either. And I think that's something that people have to kind of logically think their way through, is that we're no different than any of the other species that are on this planet that are indigenous, or part of the ecosystem, whether they're introduced by NHI or not. Yeah, everything that is part of this ecosystem is in a very delicate balance, as you know. And I think that is something that they have stripped, that even the NHI find wondrous. Because if you look around, a lot of the planets, even in our own solar system, are dry desert type. Having a very lush and life-filled planet is probably a gem amongst many. So yeah.
You said something to me on Sunday night, Jason, that kind of has stuck with me here until Friday, which was on that note. There's some type of ripple effect that takes place throughout the universe, like not only the galaxy, but when there's that type of explosion or reaction, as far as nuclear is concerned, or atomic,
Yeah, I had
it
read.
has ripple effects.
I'm trying to think. There's something that happens at the atomic level, that when an atomic bomb of that magnitude goes off. I remember reading a story of an abductee that stated that one of the NHI told them that you guys can't do those nukes anymore because you don't realize how disruptive it is to the universe. And that's why we can't let this happen, because it literally tears time and space, as well as creates this huge, mushroom cloud. And that's why it lasts so many thousands of years, because it's ripped through the atomic level and quantum levels of things so badly that it's tearing holes in the fabric of time-space and stuff like that is probably what it's doing. But they actually can detect it from a great distance, apparently, as well. And that seems to have been what the NHI actually told some of these abductees, is that that's how horribly destructive nukes are.
Gosh. A few more trying to get in here, so I'll try to do that. AKA, are you there? I know you're waiting as well.
Oh yeah, you betcha. Been waiting for this long time.
There you go.
Okay, Jay, walk us through this. All right. So finish up boot camp, head off to MOS training.
Yep.
Go through the basic course, the advanced course, to get qualified for red teaming.
Yep.
End up out at the site.
Yep.
Now, at that point, you haven't been read in. Did you have any idea what you were about to experience at that point before you went through the indoc period?
No, even when I went through the indoc, I had no idea what door I had just opened. All I had was a conversation with one of my friends that I didn't know was in the program, and we were just talking about Dreamland, which is Area 51. And I told him it would be cool just to say I set foot in there. And he just kind of giggled at me. And within a few short weeks, I was actually working in there.
Okay, so let me understand this. Did the first time you hear about anything related to the ETH, was that during an exercise, an op, what have you? Or had you already been briefed that you may be hearing some of those indicators?
Say that again.
Okay, so was the very first time you heard anything about this when you were in the middle of a mission? Or was there anything that you saw in writing or verbal?
Yes, it's twofold. The only other document I was handed when I got read in was when I was brought to the cantina up at Groom Lake, and they handed me this piece of paper that had the mission statement about what I was going to do. And I started reading it, and then they burst in the room within 30 seconds, and I hadn't even finished reading this paper. It was only like one sheet of paper. And it was it was the most humorous thing. They're chasing me around, and they're like, "Give me that. You know, we only had 30 seconds with it, too, so just give it to us. It's just the way it goes." And I'm like, "Oh, you people are jerks." So they finally grabbed it off me, but I read a good portion of it. But it was pretty hilarious. It was kind of weird. But that was the first exposure. And, yeah, there was stuff on there about flying saucers and stuff was on that sheet of paper.
Now, did it include any of the historical Air Force, the briefing that Doty received? Was there any carryover there?
No, Doty and I did not serve the same mission type.
Oh, okay, yeah, gotcha. I was just curious if they reused any of that reporting for.
There was another. Well, in any program, you're given what's called the standard video or the read-in video, and you sit down, you watch a video, and it tells you, "Welcome to program blah blah blah," and get ready to have your life changed, and here's the things that are important that you can't talk about, and it's your job to keep this secret. And it looks very much like those World War II kind of pitches that you see, so everybody gets those, but it's depending on the mission you had. But Doty never got read into that stuff. He had a totally different mission set altogether. He was just minding the test site. He wasn't read into the program.
Let's get one more AKA, and then we can. I think we still have two people waiting to ask questions. I know Jason's got to get out of here in a bit.
Okay, last question. Jay, do you see any parallel between what we're experiencing in the cyber domain to what we're experiencing in the space domain?
Yeah, there seems to be a huge advancement. Yes, I would say there's a common thread that there seems to be a huge interest in both of those domains right now. And there's probably a damn good reason for that, not just because of the threat from other adversaries against our country, but there may be other things, parts of special programs that are involved in that expenditure of resource as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Interesting.
Yep.
Thanks, AKA. I know, Jason, are you good for two more here?
Yeah, two more.
All right. Rob, go ahead. And then Chris, you'll be last.
Hey, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Hi, Jason. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for having me on. The question I wanted to ask was whether Jason was aware of the Aztec crash that's mentioned in the MJ-12 documents.
The one in Peru?
No, it was Aztec, New Mexico, I think in 1948.
No, I did not know of that one, no.
Right. Well, in that crash, there were upwards of 20 plus life forms. Most of them died, supposedly, but there was a humanoid that survived and was taken into, lived on one of the bases for a number of years and then was eventually rehomed back to their peoples, apparently. But there is a transcript of the interview in the MJ-12 files, and he goes into elaborate detail about his previous experiences on the planet and mentions how he helped build some form of craft fuel station on the place called what we call the Isle of Pines in New Caledonia. I looked into it because I thought, well, if he's built this supposed concrete platform there, he said it's still there. You can still go there and see it. So I thought, all right, well, I'll check it out, see what's going on. Archaeology kicks up in the early 50s on the Isle of Pines by pure coincidence, and they start finding hundreds of these huge mounds. Each mound is a couple of meters across with a concrete cylinder with a iron, like upside down teardrop. That's about 2 meters tall at the bottom of the cylinder, and there are hundreds of these on the island, and there's no explanation for why they're there.
Wow. Yeah, it does sound like something to investigate. I didn't. That's a total new one on me.
It's absolutely baffling why it's not been. I never hear anyone talking about it when I'm listening to all the different podcasts and stuff, and it seems like there's very verifiable. If there's
Rob,
something...
I gotta tell you, Rob, it sounds like this is something I need to do an episode of UAP on. I gotta look into that more myself. That sounds pretty cool. I've heard of.
Somebody's got to send a team out, man.
Yeah, I've heard of the Aztec crash. I never heard all those details before. That's that's something.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about how he was his people that going back thousands of years. He said he built that port on the Isle of Pines. That it was like a craft where all the craft could land and refuel some form of energy. But he built that with his grandfather. He said he poured the concrete with his father, and the way they've been able to date, well, whatever it is there, is because there are snail shells in the concrete.
Oh, wow.
So I can't remember how many thousands of years old it says it is. But it predates any known inhabitants of peoples that lived around there by thousands of years. He mentions how he was in contact, his people were in contact with the people in North America, like the native people that have lived there for thousands of years. He sounds like Elon Musk as well in the transcript. He sounds like Elon Musk. It is bizarre. He's very humorous. He speaks perfect English. Talks in a really weird, affected way. And I don't hear anybody talking about it. And it's like, why is nobody picking up on this? One or two other people have mentioned it on Reddit in different posts and stuff. But yeah, I was just wondering if Jason had ever come across that or anything,
No,
it sets me on fire.
That sounds very intriguing, though. I'm going to look that up now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks.
Stephen, if you want to talk about it further, just give me a shout, man, because I love your podcast, I love you, and everything that you're doing.
Post us a link to some sites on that.
Absolutely, yeah. There is an Australian archaeologist has done a huge write-up. He has no connection to UAP whatsoever. There's no mention of UAP in his archaeological article. But yeah, I'll send it over to Stephen, definitely. Cool. The only other thing I was going to mention is about Ross Coulthart's supposed giant craft that was so big it couldn't be moved, and they had to build something over it. And he's give out lots of clues about it being having a laudatory purpose, whatever the landmark is, and it's relevant to the US, Australian, and UK governments. I'm a nutcase, so I spend a lot of time, my spare time, investigating these things. And I reckon, because he says he's had a number of people come forward with the same location mentioned to him, I think it's Australian intelligence that keep coming back to him about it, and therefore probably an Australian location. Have you guys ever looked at the Australian Parliament building in Canberra? That thing, I mean, just to look at, looks like there's a UFO, there's a craft underneath it. Really? It's huge.
The DSA building?
It's called the Australian Parliament, the Parliament of Australia. And it's in Canberra.
Okay.
It's a hill with a huge circle, and underneath it there are endless caverns and open spaces. There is apparently also a space called the Cathedral, which would be adequate for a bunker to be built, because they're politicians and whatnot, and they have to have a backup plan in case there's an incident or the government falls or whatever. They always need to have an underground or some form of bunker. There's a space called the Cathedral underneath it, where supposedly it would be big enough to house something of that nature. So yeah, that's my best bet for Ross's.
Wow.
But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Sorry to take up so much time.
No, good. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Rob. Real quick, what anything about MJ12? I mean, there's been so much talk about that over the years.
Yeah, I'd say that, the organization's changed names numerous times since then. But yeah, there's still groups of people like that. It's evolved into several different types of groups that are now sometimes a bit disjointed. But yeah, it's still alive and well and expanded actually. And
But it really did kind of start off as that,
well, yeah, in the early days, it was just the first group of scientists and leadership.
Crazy. Gosh, it's just amazing. Christy, go ahead and we'll give you the last one. Sorry, guys. I know there were others that were trying to get in. I know Jason's got to get going. So, Christy, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen, for letting me speak. Hi, Jason. My question is, why didn't they intervene back before when we were first testing, before we dropped Hiroshima and Nagasaki? The other question is, how much damage is when we were testing in the beginning as compared to them when we kept shooting them off now, or if we did worse? What is there like a line in the sand that just was too much and they had to come intervene, or did they just say, they know too much now? So thank you so very much for your time. I hope I get to talk to you again soon. I'm an experiencer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that yes, you're right. That they are concerned about more of the megatonnage, that we went from just the Nagasaki bomb size and then exponentially got bigger and bigger. And I think it got to the point where there was like really drawing their attention. And I think that's when they stepped in with the Minuteman missiles, because that's when they were getting ridiculously damaging, and totally mad world kind of level. That's when I think it went beyond the pale for them. So that's how I would describe their concern for nukes, is that, initially the smaller atomic bombs were still very disruptive, and that caught their attention. But then when they saw how we got to the point of 10 times that amount, 100 times that amount, and we were fast approaching even larger amounts, they were like, oh boy, no, we can't have this.
It just got out of hand, I guess. Let me get you out of here on this, Jason, and just on the subject of the space, on when I put this out there last night, of the idea of subliminal disclosure, right? Aliens in the mainstream media. It's just something that kind of hit me a little bit this week when it came to the study that Dr. Michael Masters from Harvard, where he's talked about, possibly aliens living amongst us for many, many years, like we've talked about here tonight. And then the Daily Mail coming out with an article saying that there's a Pentagon official who's talking about this blue UFO that shined a very bright light for 7 minutes. Even Donald Trump was talking about aliens yesterday on a Logan Paul podcast because he was asked about it. And he said that, Air Force pilots told him what they saw. So it seemed like there was a lot going on specifically this week. And it just, to me, it felt intentional. Maybe I'm looking into it too much. Do you think there's something to that this would be like a slow drip process where these different things would come out one after the other?
Well, yeah. And one of the biggest reasons I would say that it's going to be a long drip is because they're much more long-lived than we are. And that disclosure itself is going to be a long drip as well, because it's a governmental process. And just about every senator I've talked to or congressperson I've talked to, they've said the same thing, that nothing quick ever happens in Washington. Right. So, yeah, we've got to we believe me, planned disclosure is just another name for it. This takes a while, really. And what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to add to the voice that the American people, because we're a big part of who gets voted in, and voices our concerns. And I think that's a big, huge power. And that's why a lot of the congressmen and women are very worried about their electoral votes. But on top of that, if this is an issue, whoever you're voting for, pick the right people, do some homework on them, that kind of. So yeah, that's the only way we can push forward. But the vote comes from us,
Interesting. So this is something that really could be like, well, maybe it is subliminal. I don't know. Kind of like that intention. Here's a little Easter egg now, and then we'll drop another one, and then another one, and over time, maybe people just start accepting it more. But I know that's what you're trying to avoid is that slow drip, right? I mean, that's why you're out. In fact, when we talked on Sunday, you even said to me, if they got you in front of Congress, the first thing I would say is, okay, it's all real. Now let's talk about what needs to be done next, right?
Yep.
Do you think you'll get in front of there? We can finish on that.
Well, I do. Yes, I am hopeful that this is the only generation in my time, in your time, in our time, that I've seen so many celestial bodies all align on this subject, and we're trying to get to a better spot with it. So I think this is like the only time we're going to have available to us, and if we don't take the opportunity, we've missed it, or we've missed another one. And again, just like last year, if we do the same old thing with testimonies as we did last year, I don't think that's going to push enough.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because before you came on, I asked the question. It kind of feels like if it's the same three guys or even one of those guys, it may not push the needle that much. Do you feel like it needs to be new faces on there, such as yourself, if we do get another congressional hearing?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's one of the things that people wanted to see after David came forward was they were like, all right, yeah, let's talk to some of the first-handers now. And they're waiting for that. But more than that, I think it has to come with some real meat and potatoes about, what are we trying to do this time around that's different? I mean, it's all great that people want to talk to us publicly, but is this really going to change the landscape? Is it going to matter? That's the other piece to it that is I'm struggling to figure out, like, who's doing what right now? Please tell me. And I'm not getting a good answer for myself right now, but I'm doing what I can.
Yeah,
and that's about all I can say right now. Is that I know I'm trying, and I'm sure other people are trying right now. It would be great if we had more whistleblowers come forward.
That's the hope, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, just honestly, if what I heard on Mission is true, their lives are at risk, man. That this program within a decade or so, it's not going to exist anymore, one way or the other. If what we've heard is true.
And by that you mean the NHI are going to put an end to it one way or the other.
Put them to death, and that's going to be that. Period. And so it's either getting shut off by the NHI, or they return everything like they should, and try to make good on all the mistakes, and just try to reconcile all of that. And again, they're going to have to put down the gauntlet, and they're going to have more transparency, whether they like it or not, and try to retain as much national security as they can as well at the same time. So it's a very precarious place for them right now. And that's another part of this is I'm trying to push for the people that are my friends in the program that, come on, man, I'm not stupid. I wasn't the only analyst on that mission, and you all heard the same exact conversation I did. You don't,
right?
It's one thing to say you don't remember that, but I don't think it'd be easy to forget. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that brings it all to mind. That I think that might be ultimately, the two end games here is that one way or the other, it's going to end. It's just the nature of how it ends is the question.
Well, we'll continue to try to keep the conversations going in between, and hopefully things end well one way or another, whatever that end looks like. And hopefully we can do this again. And I look forward to talking to you more, Jason. And I know I speak for everybody in this space tonight and how much we appreciate what you do, what you're doing, and everything that's you're going to try to do in the future. And like I said, hopefully we can just continue to keep these conversations going all the way up until the documentary release from James Fox, and then beyond that, more conversations that hopefully we'll be able to have in depth once the entire story comes out.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, it's been good talking to you. I'm glad we had our conversation. Kind of just was like, well, I want to talk to him, just because he seems like he's got his head together. So I'm glad we did that. And then it kind of, prompted me to get a little bit more active today because I just felt like, maybe another month or two before I can even get to a point where, the film is about ready to show. And then I have more freedom to what I could talk about. But, we've talked about a lot of other things that are not related to the film, which I'm happy. But so I'm hoping things come out for the. And we've also put a good plug out there for even the people in the program. That's what I really think I wanted to do this time around, is really strongly state to the people in the program, think about what you're doing. If what I heard on mission in the program is true, you really, really need to get with some folks and dig out that report and ask, what the hell are we doing here? And really assess, is this the best route forward? They really need to do that and take that to heart. And that's what I really want to do this time around, is make sure that they hear that clearly, that I'm not trying to be an a-hole. I'm trying to help and point them back to something that happened in their own program back in 1990s that they need to really pay attention to.
Amen, Jason. We appreciate you, and hopefully do this again soon. Thank you.
Me too. And thank you, everybody, again, for the respect. Honestly, that's something that's going to really help the community out. And the more that we clean up our own talking space from all the people that try to bust it up, the better it's going to look for everybody.
Absolutely. Well said. Thanks. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for coming in here tonight. Like I said, we're going to keep this up, so glad we can do it tonight. Thanks a lot, everybody.
All right.
And there you go. UAP exclusive Twitter Spaces conversation there with Jason Sands. Answered a lot of questions on a lot of different topics. And I hope you found that enjoyable, informative, and hopefully your mind didn't explode from some of the things. Like I said, it was heavy. It was a lot to take in. Trust me, I completely understand. But Jason's a great guy. I just want to thank him again for doing that, for trusting me to have a private conversation with me for over 3 hours a week or two ago. That led to the Twitter Spaces conversation, with many users there on Twitter. So I just want to say thanks again personally to Jason Sands for reaching out to me to have these conversations, and for allowing me to kind of be, a conduit to get his voice out there and his message out there. It's an honor, honestly. And there's plenty more to come. I know that for sure, as the documentary comes out and as, conversations and discussions continue to take place and new topics and new details come out regarding his story and so many other things. I know we're kind of just getting started with Jason and so much more. So thank you again. I'm glad you got to hear that if you weren't able to hear it on Twitter. And hopefully you didn't mind how long it was as well. Normally if something's that long on UAP, if it's an interview, I normally break it up into two parts. I've done that many times. But for this one, I felt like it deserved, not deserved, but it served the delivery best if you got to hear it all in one piece. It felt like breaking it up was going to kind of take away from the message. So I wanted to put, even though it was long, I wanted to put the entire thing out there in one piece for you. So hopefully that was all good. Man, what a night that was. What a conversation. And like I said, I know there's plenty more to come. Speaking of which, down the line here on UAP as we get into next week, you can look forward to a couple of things. I'll be talking to Michael Ian Black, a comedian, actor, and part of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. He's, one of those guys in Hollywood that is into this subject. He's talked about it a lot on his own podcast, and he's been a guest on a couple of different other shows. So really excited to talk to him. Michael Ian Black will be on UAP next week. You can look forward to that. And, well, this is big. Something that I've been asked a lot in the past 2 or 3 weeks. Scott Roeder will be coming back on the show with me. Of course, crime scene reconstruction expert and most known for at the moment in the UFO community, coming out with videos saying that he proves, or that proves, the aliens in the Las Vegas case with the Kenmore family were real and really in the backyard with the up-close picture I've been talking about. So exciting stuff there. There's your answer. I've been getting that question for the past few weeks. When is Scott going to show it? When are you going to have him on? I'm as excited and anxious as you, so I completely get why you're asking. I would be asking the same question, and I asked him that same question, and he and I spoke a few days ago on the phone, and we were able to carve out some time next week where he's going to come back on, and we're going to go over it. We're going to reveal it, and he's going to show what's going on there and how he's able to show that these aliens were really there in the backyard in Las Vegas. That is going to be wild. Stay tuned for that and for so much more. I can't wait. I can't wait for you to hear that and to see that right here on UAP. So much good stuff that's happened and good stuff coming up. So thanks so much for joining and for listening. And be sure to follow along, as always, on Twitter and social media at UA Podcast 850 on Twitter and TikTok, at UA Podcast on YouTube, sdieneruap@gmail.com. That's SDIENERUAP@gmail.com for any direct messages you'd like to send me there, and or any messages on Twitter if you follow the show. And, of course, continue to download and subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts. Great ratings. Always love that. If you like the show, please feel free to do that as well. But I'm rushing because you spent enough time. I've taken enough of your time here on the show today. So thank you so much. I'll leave it at that. So much more to come on UAP. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Man, this is really just such an exciting time. So we'll do it all again coming up soon with so much more on UAP. It's Stephen Diener here saying we'll talk again next time on the Unidentified Alien Podcast. Thanks so much for listening today, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now. Be well.